So Laura, it is wonderful to be here at your French chateau. I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and we are here with Laura Knight-Jadczyk, and she's got a huge body of work that I'm amazed by. You are intellectually very astute. You're an amazing researcher. You're also a wonderful channel, if you want to call yourself a channel. Kind of a loose
I avoid that term.
Okay, fine. And I've studied your work, and I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
And that's why we're here today, because we want to hear more about it. I want to introduce you to the world that doesn't know about you. I want them to learn what you're really about. And give your own introduction of yourself.
Well, I guess it depends on the individual. Some people are very happy to be asked to talk about themselves. I don't really like to talk about myself that much because I've spent most of my life putting the attention on other people, and I guess that's why we live here as we do, rather privately, so that I can work, because I work best when I'm not disturbed by, unforeseen events, or when my family is around me and happy, then I'm happy and I work well. So that's how I live, with my family. So that I can concentrate on my work. So right away, I didn't say anything about myself, did I?
No, but you're doing very well anyway, because you're giving us a little background to who you really are and what you're motivated by. What would be great is to hear a little bit about your intellectual history, because you're an amazing writer and you're very clear. You're very clear in the way you think. That's what I've gathered from reading your work, and I think that that's a special skill. And so maybe you could talk about, just for the very basics, because some people are out there are going to want to know, did you graduate from college, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't graduate from college. I had children instead, and that's a fairly common story for many very bright, intelligent women who are brought up to take care of other people. They have children, or they have families, and we're taught that that's the most important thing for a woman. My generation was taught that, and when the family comes along, everything else gets put aside. It was rather difficult for me, because I did have a very powerful curiosity. It's been described by other people as an epic curiosity, and I would say that if anything describes me, that's curiosity. I'm a walking question mark. I literally want to know everything, and I know it's impossible to know everything, but I want to, grab everything I can as long as I'm alive. I did go to college. I was kind of a professional student for 2 or 3 years. But then, like I said, I had a baby, and that was the end of my college career. But it wasn't the end of my intellectual pursuits, because I had developed the habit as a very young child of reading approximately an entire book every day. And and that really started after I had been in 7th grade, when I was 13 years old, because we had a teacher who taught us to speed read, which was a very clever thing. He had a machine that he brought into class. He taught everybody to speed read, and I thought, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, because I can read very, very fast. And I was blessed with a photographic memory, so that I could not only read, but I could remember everything I read. This was very handy at test time, because I could pull everything out of my memory for taking tests. So, you know, I was very good at taking tests, but I was really bad at doing homework, because for me, homework was just, you know, drudgery. Why should I sit there and write down for somebody else, you know, to prove that I've, you know, done this busy work? It didn't interest me. I mean, I had read the book, I had the material in my head, I didn't see any point in belaboring it. I wanted to go to the next thing. So I didn't turn in a lot of homework, but I made A's on all my tests, so that, you know, that kind of confuses teachers who like things to be done by the book. So I continued this habit all through the time my children were little, and as I've written, at the point that I'd had my fourth child, and I was bedridden, so not only did I pursue my my habit of reading as much as I possibly could, but I got into some other things because there was a lot of stress in my life. So I began practicing things like, you know, meditation and so on and so forth.
And how old were you approximately during this time? When you started meditating, for example?
When I started meditating, let's see, when my fourth child was born in 1985, so that would be when I started meditating.
Mm-hmm. And how did that go for you?
Well, I had extraordinary results in a very short period of time, and that's a whole other story, because we've developed a breathing and meditation program based on the technique that I developed more or less on my own, just based on reading some material about meditation, and it was a combination of meditative techniques and hypnotherapeutic techniques, because I had also trained as a hypnotherapist.
When did you train as a hypnotherapist?
When I was going to college, I was 21 years old.
Oh, really? So you'd already decided to go in that direction?
Yeah, because you know, I wanted to know everything, and one of the things I wanted to know was what goes on in the human mind. What makes people act the way they do? What makes people think the way they do? Why is it that people say that they love something and then they treat it so abominably? Why do people say I'm a good person and act so bad? And why do you know, all of the contradictions of life? Because, you know, people say things, but then you see in reality that that's not exactly what really happens. And of course there's the religious impetus. I was brought up in a very religious family. We were Methodist when I was growing up. And
well, we actually want to go there slightly. I know that you had sort of a time in which you were, I don't know if you want to call it kidnapped or something of that nature, by a family member, I think, someone related to you?
Yes, stepfather.
Yes, that seems to have sort of
that was kind of the yeah, it was a trigger. I was 2.5, 3 years old, and my mother and father had been divorced when I was very young. Obviously, because they were divorced before I was 2.5 or 3. And my mother had married or remarried a man who was an ex-Navy man that she met in Orlando, where she was living and working at the time where we were living there. And it varies after a whirlwind courtship, and I think it was because he danced so well. My mother was a dancer. And so he moved us to Jacksonville, and it was in Jacksonville that he started behaving, you know, rather erratically, to say the least. Doing strange things, like she would come home and find him huddled in a fetal position in the closet with his hands over his head, and saying that somebody was coming to get him, or something was going on, or he would, you know, he was extremely paranoid. And my mother, you know, knew this wasn't normal behavior. And it got worse, so there was a separation. And I, being a child, you know, in those days, parents didn't really tell children what's going on. It's not like, you know, oh, you're not supposed to talk to your stepfather anymore. And you know, actually, I liked him. You know, he was kind of fun. He was entertaining. And he was good to me. So he had been showing me pictures of cars in a magazine and asked me, he said he wanted to get a new car, and if he was going to get a new car, what color car I would want. And I said, yellow and black. And so several weeks later, and this was after he was gone, he drives up to the house in a yellow and black convertible. And do I want to go for a ride? And since nobody had told me I wasn't supposed to speak to him or go anywhere with him, of course I'll go. So I went for a ride. We went down a long drive through a lot of forest. Came to a road that turned off into the forest, drove down this long road, and at the end of this road there was a clearing, like a perfectly square, well-mown clearing, grass, and in the center of the clearing was a small white clapboard house with a porch. It just looked like an ordinary, like a farmhouse even, except that there was nothing anywhere around this. I mean, it was smack in the middle of this very large clearing that was very, well manicured. And there were two men in khaki-looking uniforms and a woman in a white dress that were standing on the porch. We drove up to the house and they said, well, we've been waiting for you, and welcomed me to come inside the house and sat me down at the dining room table. I remember sitting at the dining room table and they were asking me questions. I don't remember the questions. And then one of them said, you must be very tired, you need to take a nap. And I agreed. And they took me into this room, and there was a stainless steel baby bed. And they put me in this stainless steel baby bed and gave me a bottle. And I'm thinking, I'm 2.5, 3 years old. I didn't think that, but I'm thinking, I'm too big for a bottle. But they gave me this bottle and said, here, no, it's okay, you can have this. And so I started to drink this bottle because I was hungry. And that's the last thing I remember until I was I remember sitting in the car with my stepfather, and we were driving very fast through, a lot of flashing lights, so it was like in the city. And we were being chased by the police. And he, was trying to weave around to avoid capture and going very fast and turning corners and so forth. And then he ended up, because apparently there was another one that was coming around from the front, and so he drove up on somebody's lawn and crashed into a palm tree. And I hit my face on the dashboard. And I remember the policeman coming and taking me out of the car. And then I remember the policeman handing me over to my mother, and that's basically what I remembered for most of my life. Everything from the time I drank that bottle until I came to myself in this car was a complete blank.
And when did you start to recover those memories?
Well, the first problem with something like that is we're talking about the memory of a 2.5, 3-year-old child. Is the child remembering, I understood this, am I remembering anything accurately? So of course, I had to question my mother about it, and she gave some details. And what had happened, though it is known from the outside, is that as soon as she had discovered that I was missing, she called my grandmother in Tampa. We were in Jacksonville. She called my grandmother in Tampa. My grandmother called my grandfather, who was in Nassau. In fact, I don't think he was in Nassau. He was on an out island working on an engineering job. And they sent a plane to pick him up.